At this time, I'd like to introduce our presenter, Lisa Shoulders. Lisa is the Senior Product Manager for System Sensor. Lisa, take it away.
Thanks, David. Also, I want to say thank you to all of you on the phone for taking the time to sit in on this webinar. First, the purpose of this webinar is to provide a basic overview of duct smoke detectors, as well as basic code and testing information. The objective that will be covered in this webinar is first to walk through what a duct smoke detector is comprised of and the principal operation behind how they function. We will then talk about the installation of duct smoke detectors, different features that should be considered when choosing a duct smoke detector, and lastly, the testing requirements for duct smoke detectors. First up is the anatomy of a duct smoke detector. So this slide here shows an exploded view of a duct smoke detector and points out all of its different components. A duct smoke detector is comprised of an open area type smoke detector that's mounted in a housing, which utilizes a sampling and exhaust tube that are both located in the airstream to sample the air moving through the HVAC system. Most duct smoke detectors utilize photoelectric technology, which is the type of technology that is recommended by NFPA. There are still ionization duct smoke detectors available on the market, but typically they're just not really used in duct applications anymore. Duct smoke detectors also have the ability to be powered from a variety of different voltages that are listed there on the screen. The principal operation of a duct smoke detector is to have proper airflow moving across the sampling and exhaust tube, which this airflow is measured by differential pressure testing. In order to get the proper differential pressure required for the duct smoke detector to operate, the sampling and exhaust tubes must be properly installed, and a minimum airspeed of at least 100 feet per minute must be present. And then the differential pressure measurement should be between 0.01 inches of water and then no more than 1.11 inches of water. This ensures that your duct smoke detector will function properly in the event that there is smoke present in the duct. When smoke is detected, the fan system will be turned off by the normally closed contact, and the trouble alarm signal will be initiated via the normally open contacts. As I mentioned on the previous slide, the sampling and exhaust tubes must be properly installed in order for the duct smoke detector to function at all. The sampling tube must be installed so that the air holes are facing in the direction of the airflow, and the sampling tube must be installed into the housing connection that meets the airflow first. As you can see in the drawing, there is an arrow located on the plastic adapter of the tube indicating the proper direction of where those holes are facing. I know that this sounds like complete common sense, but surprisingly enough, we have seen on many occasions in the field where sampling tubes are installed with the holes facing in the wrong way or the exhaust tube in front of the sampling tube. So it's just something that we like to point out. As you can see on the chart to the right side of the screen, sampling tubes come in a variety of different sizes that can be used in ducts all the way up to 12 feet in width. Oftentimes sampling tubes are cut, so there may be a need to have additional holes drilled into the sampling tube. So as a rule of thumb, we always say we would like to see a total of 10 to 12 holes evenly distributed across the width of the duct. Another thing that we often see is sampling tubes installed without the red end cap in place. But if the end cap is not in place, the duct smoke detector most likely will not be functioning properly. So that is just another thing that we like to mention every time we talk about our sampling tubes, is that you really need to ensure that that red sampling tube end cap is firmly installed. After mounting the detector to the duct itself and installing the sampling and exhaust tubes, you need to verify that there is adequate airflow through the duct smoke detector. This is done by measuring the static pressure difference between the sampling and exhaust tube openings with the use of a manometer. So this is that same differential pressure testing that we spoke about a few slides ago. There are a few points that should be remembered when selecting your length of sampling tube. First, be sure to select the proper length sampling tube. For sampling tubes that are shorter than the width of the duct, you just slide the sampling tube in, ensure that end cap is installed, and the sampling tube will just snap right into place. Sampling tubes that are over 3 feet long should, one, either be supported at the opposite end of the duct smoke detector or should be supported within the duct. If the duct is wider than 8 feet, usually there are 2 separate pieces of the sampling tube that are connected together with a 1/2-inch conduit fitting. So when you're doing that, you also want to make sure that the holes in both sections are lined up and facing into the airflow. For tubes that are actually longer than the width of the duct, the tube should extend out the opposite side. To do this, you just drill a 3/4 inch hole on the opposite side of the ductwork, adjacent to, or directly across, but slightly lower than where the sampling tube opening is. We want to ensure that the sampling tube, once it is installed, is angled downward from the detector, and this allows moisture to drain away from the detector. So the sampling tube should be angled at approximately a 1/4 inch downward for every foot for the width of the duct. If the portion of sampling tube that extends outside of the ductwork has more than 2 holes exposed, you can either choose a shorter length sampling tube, or the sampling tube can be trimmed so that there's only about 1 or 2 inches extending outside of the duct. Once that's complete, plug the end of the duct with that end cap and then tape closed any holes in the protruding section of the sampling tube to make sure all of those are covered. And then finally, just be sure to seal the duct where the tube is protruding outside of the duct with duct sealant. On an earlier slide, I mentioned that photoelectric technology is the preferred method for duct smoke detection according to NFPA. This is because in duct applications, smoke particles are usually larger, which photoelectric technology responds better to. Also, photoelectric technology duct smoke detectors are the only option for use in low-flow applications. Typically, ionization detectors can only be used at air speeds as low as 300 feet per minute. So overall, photos can be utilized in a duct housing in a wider range of applications, and they can be installed in air speeds as low as 100 feet per minute, which meets the current code requirements. There are a number of different types of duct smoke detectors available on the market today. First, there are 2- and 4-wire models for use in conventional systems. The 2-wire conventional duct smoke detector only communicates normal, alarm, and trouble conditions. The 4-wire conventional model also communicates the normal, alarm, and trouble conditions, but it also has increased functionality built into it to shut down equipment and has the ability for remote testing without the use of a test coil. Addressable detectors are designed to work with a fire alarm control panel. They are designed to communicate a specific protocol and have a unique address that is shown at the fire alarm control panel if it were to go into an alarm or trouble condition, and that allows you to easily locate which detector has gone into alarm. Finally, watertight models are also available. They're available in both conventional and intelligent varieties, and this just allows flexibility to install duct smoke detectors in a wider range of applications. David, it looks like we're at our first poll question.
All right, thank you, Lisa. So the first poll question that we'll launch here, and we do encourage you to respond to the poll question. We also will take at least one question posed by the audience with each poll question. So if you do have questions, go ahead and use that question box on the GoToWebinar control panel. But the first poll question relates to what is the best way to learn about new products, or what's the best way you have to learn about new products? Is it that online search? Maybe you use Google or another search engine. Are there ads in trade magazines? Do you see an ad for a new product? Do you maybe directly from the manufacturer, be it their website, email, mail, sales rep, or catalog? Perhaps you visit trade shows and use that as an opportunity to learn about new products, or other. And if you could, send us a chat or use that question box again and tell us what your other is. We would appreciate that. Lisa, while they're answering that poll question, the first question that's come in is, I'm told that the duct smoke detector isn't compatible with the building's addressable fire alarm system and has to be replaced. What should he do in that situation?
Okay, I've heard that question before. A lot of times when duct smoke detectors come pre-installed in a rooftop unit, they're always going to be conventional units. So there is an option to replace that duct smoke detector with an intelligent version, but that's really not necessary. You can just add a monitor module. So the addition of the monitor module provides a location-specific address to the duct smoke detector. So when a change in the monitored contact will then show that alarm initiation at the fire alarm control panel, so that gives you the same functionality as having an intelligent detector by just adding that monitor module.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Let me go ahead and close the poll question. 79% of you voted. So, we're just flipped over to 80, so we do encourage the other 20% that didn't vote to go ahead and do that. Let me close it, and with these first two poll questions, we are going to share the results with you. Lisa, kind of like on last Tuesday's webinar, that direct from the manufacturer seems to be coming back big and bold. 73% of the audience picked that as their best choice, followed by a distant second on online searches using Google or Bing or something like that. All right, let me take that poll question down. And Lisa, we're back to you for the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next section of the presentation will provide an overview of the installation of duct smoke detectors, and will highlight various applications that they can be utilized in. Duct smoke detectors can be installed in a variety of different applications, including mounting it to the ductwork itself, installed in a commercial packaged unit or rooftop unit. There are outdoor rooftop applications, and then installation on smoke or fire dampers. First, the most common place for duct smoke detectors to be installed is on the actual ductwork. These installations are performed primarily by the mechanical contractor. Depending on what code is being enforced, an alarm indication device may also be required. Oftentimes, duct smoke detectors are installed in applications where they can't be seen from the occupied space. So sometimes they're installed in rooftop units. Sometimes they're just so far above the ceiling that you can't see them. So an audible and or visible signal may be required for detector status indication or for detector testing. After installation, the fire alarm contractor will connect to the duct smoke detector and tie that to the fire alarm system when you're required to have a fire alarm system installed. Here, this is just a very, very basic drawing showing how a duct smoke detector would be installed on the HVAC ductwork. The purpose for this slide is just to show a basic visualization of what we've discussed so far, showing the sampling tubes and making sure that they're facing into the airflow. When installing a duct smoke detector, it is very important to make sure you're getting a sufficient air sample and to try to avoid stratified air. So stratified air is where there may be two or more separate air streams that don't mix together in the duct. In order to help avoid this issue, follow the 6 duct width rule, which is recommended by NFPA 72 whenever possible. First, duct smoke detectors should be mounted at least 10 feet downstream from a humidifier and 6 duct widths from either a bend or change in airflow direction. It is important to ensure that the duct itself and the detector are properly sealed. This helps to prevent air leaks that could redirect or dilute the smoke that is present in the duct. We also provide gaskets with all of our duct smoke detectors that help to provide a proper seal where the exhaust tubes and sampling tubes are going into the ductwork itself. Duct smoke detectors also have requirements for the environment in which they can be installed. The airspeed within the system should be verified to be within 100 to 4,000 feet per minute when installing a standard type duct smoke detector. If the airspeed is lower than 100 feet per minute, a pendant style or a pendant mount style duct smoke detector should be used. Duct smoke detectors also have different temperature and humidity ranges that are required for the installation. So Check the literature of the particular detector that you're installing to be sure that you are within those specified parameters. As for the system sensor duct smoke detectors, our standard duct smoke detectors are approved for a temperature range of -4 to 158 degrees Fahrenheit and for humidity range of 0 to 95% non-condensing. Oftentimes when we talk to customers, there seems to be a lot of questions regarding how to properly wire a 4-wire duct smoke detector. There are a number of different sets of contacts that can be wired to perform different functions. The normally closed auxiliary contacts can be used to shut down or shut off a blower motor or a fan. The normally closed supervisory contacts are wired to initiate a trouble signal, and then the normally open alarm contacts will initiate an alarm signal at the fire alarm control panel. So the image here on the right side of the screen is just showing you a typical wiring diagram for a 4-wire duct smoke detector. Sometimes duct smoke detectors come factory fitted in rooftop units. Rooftop manufacturers offer the duct smoke detector as an accessory option to provide a convenience for the end user. Many duct smoke detectors pre-installed in rooftop units also will come pre-wired, and this is just an additional item to help make the installation easier. Depending on the size of the rooftop unit or the code that is being followed, the detectors will be installed in the supply or the return or in both sections of the rooftop unit. Sometimes the manufacturer of the rooftop unit may replicate the duct smoke detector wiring in the control section of that rooftop unit just to allow for easier access to that part of the detector. Another thing to point out is this is something that can be easily accomplished if you're utilizing the split feature of the system sensor duct smoke detector, where the sensor and power board size can be installed separately. Duct smoke detectors are also required for installation with fire and smoke dampers. In some applications with dampers in rooftop units, remote air sampling may be used. This is where you would take flexible tubing and attach it to the sampling tube area of the duct smoke detector, and then you would run that flexible tubing to where the actual sampling tube is mounted in the airspace. This allows the detector to be installed in a more convenient location, as there may or may not be adequate space for the installation of a duct smoke detector directly near where the airstream is. In order to utilize remote sampling, this is where it's particularly important to use differential pressure testing to ensure that that proper air is going to be sampled, since you do have that additional flexible tubing that the air needs to circulate through. Some rooftop installations do not allow for duct smoke detectors to be installed in the actual rooftop unit, usually due to size constraints. In that case, a watertight duct smoke detector can be installed on the outside of the rooftop unit. In the past, an outdoor enclosure would need to be used instead of actually having just a watertight duct smoke detector. The temperature range for our outdoor duct smoke detector is -4 to 158 degrees Fahrenheit when the detector is in an actual alarm state. If in standby mode, which, as we know, duct smoke detectors primarily sit in standby mode most of their life, it is approved for temperatures down to -22 degrees F. Though there are areas of the country that definitely do get colder than that -4, there should be conditioned air that's moving through your detector. When installing a watertight duct smoke detector, it's also important to use outdoor liquid-tight fittings. Those have to be used no matter what when they're installed outside. And then also, we also recommend that those conduit openings when you install the detector be on the bottom of the detector, just as another safeguard to ensure that water won't get in through those conduit openings. The final type of installation is where there are either very small ducts where standard duct smoke detectors will not fit, smaller damper applications, or where you have airflow speeds that are going below 100 feet per minute. This is where you would use that pendant type detector. A pendant type detector is very easy. It's just a standard spot type detector connected to an electrical box, and just pendant mounted right in the middle of the airflow. Okay, moving on to our next section, we will go through some things that should be considered when choosing a duct smoke detector. Okay, first, look at the environment you are installing your detector in to ensure that the detector's temperature range is adequate for the space. Also, ensure that the detector meets the airflow range required for the installation. As I mentioned, all system sensor standard type duct smoke detectors are approved for an airspeed range of 100 to 4,000 feet per minute. A unique feature offered by system sensor 4-wire conventional models is a built-in short circuit protection, where if the detector is not wired properly, the detector will just simply not function. Whereas in other instances, if you wire your detector wrong, you're at risk of frying out your board. So we have something built in so you can't do that. System sensor duct smoke detectors also offer an adjustable mounting footprint to allow the detector to be installed in a rectangular or a square configuration or anything in between. Another feature that can be utilized with the system sensor duct smoke detectors is the option to monitor a second sensor from a single power board. This is perfect for situations where supply and return duct smoke detectors are required. The 2-to-1 capability is able to be achieved in 2 ways. The first way, which is pictured here, is to connect a D4S, which is the sensor-only component, to the power board side of the D4120, which is our 4-wire conventional duct smoke detector. The second option is to utilize what we refer to as a fully distributed configuration, where 2 D4S sensor-only components connected back, it's called a D4P120 power board only component. This option is especially useful when space is at a premium. The 2 sensor components can be installed in the supply and the return, and then the power board can be remotely located in a more easily accessible area for wiring and testing. System sensor sampling tubes are also quick and easy to install. They don't require the use of any screws or tools for the installation. They snap into place and can be installed from either the front or the back of the duct smoke detector housing. And then there's also an arrow that's located on that plastic adapter. I know I mentioned that on an earlier slide, so that it's just a lot easier for you to be able to see which way your holes are facing. System sensor duct smoke detectors are also compatible with our previous designs and also with competitive duct smoke detector designs. They have the identical footprint where the sampling tube spacing has remained consistent, so it makes replacements a lot easier. The wiring numbers and terminals have also remained consistent with our previous offering. And the InnoVeriflex duct smoke detector can be tested with our new line of remote test accessories, but can also continue to be used with our old style remote test accessories. So that's helpful where if your duct smoke detector needs to be replaced, you don't have to replace all the other peripheral devices that are wired into it. On the power side of the detector, we now have additional wiring space. This was added in our newer design. And there's also a larger path between the conduit entries and the terminals. As you can see in the drawing, there's the yellow terminal designation strips. These high contrast terminals help to make wiring easy so that the terminals can be easily identified. And then finally, where you see the 3 different circles, we have a variety of conduit openings, and we have 2 separate sizes. So the 2 on top are both 1/2-inch conduit openings, and then we have a 3/4-inch knockout on the other side. Okay, David, I think we're at our second poll question.
All right, thank you, Lisa. The second poll question is somewhat related to the first poll question. So we're just curious. Now this is a very HVAC-oriented question, and we appreciate there's some core fire engineers, fire professionals on the market that may not be totally into the HVAC marketplace. But for those of you that are, what, in your opinion, is the best publication serving the HVAC marketplace? Could it be engineered systems, HVAC engineering, IE3, contractor excellence, the news, or other? Maybe you have a favorite publication, you're in the HVAC market. What is that other? And then, again, use that question or chat tab and send us what that other is. But if you could just take a few moments, send us your response, I would appreciate that. Lisa, let's take another question from the audience as well. The next question is, what do I tell an inspector or AHJ who questions the installation in a packaged rooftop unit?
Okay. Well, first, the principal operation of duct smoke detectors is that pressure differential between the sampling tube and exhaust tube. If you have the recommended pressure differential, then you know that your detector installation should perform correctly. Another thing to note is most duct smoke detectors that are installed in rooftop units do have to go through an approval process by the manufacturer of the rooftop unit to ensure that that detector is properly installed and is suitable for the location where they have put it. So that's another avenue that you can also go to. You may be able to get some information from the manufacturer of the rooftop unit.
Okay, very good. All right, about 60% of you voted in this poll, so my guess is some of you are not directly linked to the HVAC industry and maybe tying it into the duct detector from the fire or life safety side. So let me go ahead and close that poll, but I'll share the results with you. Looks like engineered systems, 47%, and then followed closely by HVAC engineering. Also, a couple people did send in, they like in the other category, they like consulting specified engineer, and they like ASHRAE journal. So thank you for participating in that. Lisa, let me take that down, pull a question down, and we'll get back to your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, in this next section of the presentation, we're going to do an overview of duct smoke detector testing. Okay, there are 3 types of tests that are recommended to be performed on any installed duct smoke detector. First, it's recommended that you follow the NFPA and UL functional test requirements. I'll review the NFPA testing requirements in the next section of the presentation, so we can talk about that then. There are airflow verification tests, smoke response tests, and finally directly applying smoke to the sensor head in order to ensure that the detector is capable of detecting smoke. When performing the recommended testing on duct smoke detectors, there are a number of different options to meeting the testing requirements. First, remote test accessories are commonly used for testing since detectors are typically installed in areas that are not easily accessible. Magnet testing is another way of testing the detector. Nowadays, most duct smoke detectors will have a built-in test feature with push button and reset functions. One of the best ways, as we've mentioned many times already, for testing a duct smoke detector is through that differential pressure testing. This test verifies that the detector will properly respond to smoke by ensuring there is proper airflow across the sampling and exhaust tube. And then this is done through the use of a manometer. The final way of testing is to apply smoke directly to the head. Okay, first testing can be conducted at the remote test accessory. The versions we are showing here in this presentation is our RTS2 and RTS2-AOS remote test stations. They both have the same functionality, but one ships with the strobe pre-installed where the other ships without the strobe installed, but there is an option to have it added at a later point if it is determined that it's needed. These remote test accessories have the most functionality out of all the remote test stations that we have available through System Sensor. We also have other less sophisticated options that only perform testing using a key or push button or even a magnet. The RTS2 remote test accessories are multifunctional in that they provide LED status indication in a remote location. They provide remote testing that can be conducted via that push button that you can see right there on the graphic. And this test button mimics the test button that is located on the detector housing. And it also has the ability to perform detector sensitivity testing from a remote location. And if you're doing that, there are, if you're using our 2-to-1 capability with the 2 sensors back to the 1 power board, you have the option of using this one accessory to monitor both of those separate sensors. So the key allows you to select sensor 1 or sensor 2 in order to perform the push button test, and then you have 2 separate LEDs that will differentiate the status between each of those installed sensors. And just to keep in mind, the RTS2 models, you can only monitor 2 sensors when you're utilizing the 2-to-1 feature back to that 1 power board. You cannot monitor 2 full separate duct smoke detectors. Okay, though there is a test button on the power side of the detector, some AHJs still like to see magnet testing done. Magnet testing can be done by holding the magnet up to the test magnet indicator, which is located on the sensor housing cover. After holding the magnet there in place for a number of seconds, the red LED should latch on, along with any accessories that the detector is tied to. All fans and equipment should also shut down, as well as a signal being sent to the fire alarm panel if the detector is tied to one. To do a reset after doing a magnet test, you would just press and release the test button, which is on the power side of the detector. The next is our onboard test and reset function, which is located on the power side of the detector. This push button works exactly the same as the one on the remote test accessory from a few slides back. The test button on the system sensor InnoVeriflex duct smoke detector will actually meet both the NFPA and UL functional test requirements. One thing that is different about the test button on the system sensor duct smoke detector is when you do that push and hold to test, it is actually verifying that the detector is within its required test limits so that the head will be able to detect smoke, as it's required per agency. This is why our test button meets that NFPA and UL functional test requirement. So our push button test actually assures that the detector is operable and will respond to the minimum required smoke limits. Okay, I've mentioned differential pressure testing a number of times throughout this presentation. So at System Sensor, we believe that this is one of the best ways to test a duct smoke detector because it tests the principal operation of the duct smoke detector. If there is any interest in learning more about differential pressure testing, we do have a differential pressure testing guide that's available on our website, so if that's something you're interested in, it's easy to find. The steps in performing differential pressure testing are pretty straightforward. First, ensure that the sampling and exhaust tubes have been installed in the detector housing. Then you want to plug the stoppers with the manometer tubes installed into the exhaust and sampling tube ports. Then you just run the test following the instructions that come with the device. They're very simple. Once the test is complete, the manometer will provide a readout that should be between 0.01 and 1.1 inches of water if your detector is functioning properly and has that proper airflow. Next is smoke testing the head, where canned smoke can be sprayed directly into the detector head in order to initiate an alarm. It's important to keep in mind that when conducting this type of test, it is only verifying that your detector will respond to smoke. It does not ensure that your sampling and exhaust tubes are functioning properly and that there is proper airflow across the detector. So your sensor head may be functioning properly, but in the case of a fire, there is still that opportunity that the detector may not respond as expected. So we recommend introducing smoke into the actual ductwork with canned smoke. This is an acceptable testing method and will ensure that not only your sensor head is functioning properly, but that you also have the proper airflow present. There are some duct smoke detectors that monitor their sensitivity limits. With the system sensor option, the blinking green LED indicates that the detector is within its minimum sensitivity limits. If the detector were to drift outside of its sensitivity limits, the LEDs would change from a green blink to an amber blink, letting you know that you're in a maintenance condition and that you may need to clean your duct smoke detector to get it back into those proper limits. Okay, now we're going to walk through a very high-level overview of the requirements for duct smoke detection and the different codes and standards. I do want to note that what we are presenting is based on national standards, and each municipality may be working off different versions of NFPA 90A or 72 or a different version of the International Mechanical Code. Also, your state or local jurisdiction may have different requirements or have adopted different versions, so be sure to check with your local AHJ to determine the exact requirements that need to be met for your area. Okay, first we want to recognize why duct smoke detectors are required for installation. The purpose of duct smoke detectors is to provide notification that smoke is present in the HVAC system and to shut down associated equipment, because as the HVAC system sends conditioned air throughout the ductwork, the code recognizes that duct systems also have the ability to transfer smoke, toxic gases, and flames created from a fire from one area of a building to another. The smoke and gases created in a fire event can pose a serious hazard to life safety unless the HVAC equipment such as rooftop units, fans, and blowers can be shut down and dampers closed to help decrease the spread of smoke and gases throughout a building. The first of the three codes that we will cover today is the International Mechanical Code. Just as a point of reference, we're using the 2012 edition for this presentation. The International Mechanical Code is arguably the most widely adopted for HVAC applications. It sets 2,000 CFM as the minimum airspeed where a duct smoke detector will start being required on the return side of the system. An exception to this requirement is where open area smoke detectors are installed in all areas of a building that is served by the HVAC system, and those open area detectors are tied into a fire alarm system that will shut down all function of the HVAC system. The open area detectors also have to comply with another section of the International Mechanical Code, and I'll cover that on a future slide. But that is in regard to having the installation of a fire alarm panel along with it. Another requirement of the International Mechanical Code calls for duct smoke detectors to be installed on the return side if there are multiple systems that once combined have a total capacity of 2,000 CFM or more, and they share either the same supply or return ducts. This next requirement here is for larger systems with a capacity of over 15,000 CFM. Here, the International Mechanical Code requires duct smoke detectors to be installed when air return risers are serving more than 2 stories of a building. Then detectors must be installed on each floor of that building. Let me go to the next slide. Okay, so this is the final main point for duct smoke detection in the International Mechanical Code. If the building code requires a fire alarm system, as many buildings now do, the duct smoke detectors must be monitored by that system and cause a supervisory signal at the panel if smoke is detected. And sending a signal to the fire alarm control panel is considered sending a signal to a constantly attended location. In some cases, duct smoke detectors may be wired for an alarm, but that really is not typically the case, so they're usually wired for a supervisory signal. Okay, now we are going to move on to the requirements for duct smoke detection in NFPA 90A, which is the standard for the installation of air conditioning and ventilating systems. I am also using the 2012 edition of NFPA 90A just as a point of reference. In this section, what I'll do is I'll try and point out where there are differences and similarities between the International Mechanical Code and NFPA 90A, because in some spots they do kind of contradict each other. Here, NFPA 90A does slightly differ from the International Mechanical Code. They both require duct smoke detectors to be installed if the AC unit is over 2,000 CFM, but in the Mechanical Code, it calls for the detector to be installed on the return side, whereas 90A requires the detector to be installed on the supply side. So if you are required to be in compliance with both NFPA 90A and the International Mechanical Code, you will have detectors on both the supply and return side for systems that are greater than 2,000 CFM. Sometimes the mechanical engineer will design a system by the International Mechanical Code, and an electrical engineer may design a system in accordance with NFPA. In that case, it could potentially be required to have a 2,000 CFM system that requires detectors on both sides. On larger systems that are over 15,000 CFM, both supply and return detectors are required if the system is serving more than one story of a building. Okay, NFPA 90A also looks at what should happen when a duct smoke detector detects smoke. First, the duct smoke detector should automatically stop the fans that are wired to it, with the exception of when the return air fan is functioning as part of a smoke control system and a different mode is required for that situation. So in cases where the fan is part of a smoke control system, and the system may be engineered in such a manner that the fan could assist in exhausting smoke out of the building instead of spreading it through the building. So in that case, you would not want to be required to shut off that fan because it's helping the situation with the smoke that's present. Here, NFPA 90A states that duct smoke detectors have to be installed and maintained per NFPA 72. We will go over those requirements as soon as we're finished with the information here for NFPA 90A. Okay, here we will look at cases where there is not an installed fire alarm system. In this situation, the duct smoke detector could cause a visual signal, or it must cause a visual and an audible signal in a normally occupied area when activated, and during a trouble condition, they should provide either or, so either an audible or a visible signal. These requirements are consistent with what is required in the International Mechanical Code. Some reasons a detector may go into trouble could include that it has lost power, there's been a cover tamper delay, or the delay itself times out, or there are wiring problems with the detector. The required visible and audible indication can be achieved by using a variety of different remote test accessories. NFPA 72 calls out the testing requirements for duct smoke detectors. Just to let you know, here we are using the 2013 edition of NFPA 72. First, duct smoke detectors are required to first be visually inspected at least semi-annually, have a functional test completed annually, and have sensitivity testing completed every other year. Furthermore, all devices that are used for shutdown should be tested annually. Though this is what NFPA states, depending on the environment where your detector is installed, testing and or inspection may be required more frequently. So at System Sensor, we always suggest testing per NFPA or as required. Some instances where inspection or testing may be required more frequently would be in an excessively dirty or dusty environment where your detector may be getting dirty. So in those cases, you want to be inspecting and testing more frequently just to make sure that your detector is staying in its required sensitivity limit. Okay, David, this is our third poll question.
All right, thank you, Lisa. We do have quite a few questions that are posted, and I know we've gotten to a number online and have reposted those out to the audience, so hopefully you're seeing a lot of the questions answered in real time. Let me go ahead and post the final poll question as well. This is a how can we help you question. So there may be some things that you found intriguing about this webinar and would like more information. So we have a couple send me's, one show me, and a call me. So under the send me's, that testing and maintenance is always a question with duct smoke detection. So we've developed a guide for that. So you're welcome to check that one if you'd like that to receive that. We have data sheets on our complete product line. Lisa's done a nice job overviewing that product line. Perhaps that's of interest to you. That does include specifications and technical information. We also, the differential pressure testing is a frequent question, and we've developed a white paper around that. So we can send you those three things. Those would be electronically sent to you. Show me, maybe there's other trainings that you'd like to have on duct detectors, and we have a couple things. We can point those out to you. Or we've intrigued you enough, perhaps you're not a system sensor duct detector customer, and you would like to talk to a sales rep. We'd certainly encourage that as well. So check those boxes as we go through some questions here. We encourage you to check all that apply. Lisa, the questions here, I'll just take them in order received of ones that we haven't answered yet.
Okay.
Can the new RTS2 test accessory be used in the old style duct detectors?
Okay. Actually, no, they cannot. They can only be used with the new Innovair Flex, and it's only the 4-wire duct smoke detector that the RTS2 can be used with. That new accessory requires more advanced communication between the accessory and the detector itself, and the older versions of our duct smoke detector don't have that capability built into it. So unfortunately, those are only able to be used with the new 4120 4-wire models.
Okay, all right, thank you. Next question, how many feet away can a remotely located detector, be installed from a power section?
Okay, just to clarify that question just so everyone understands, they're asking when you're using the split configuration or the 2-to-1 configuration where you have your sensors mounted in the Airstream and your power board mounted in a more convenient location. The distance between those two sections should not exceed 1,000 feet.
Okay, very good. Two questions in one here, but they're related. They're questioning what is duct detector maintenance and what does a maintenance condition actually mean on the duct detector?
Okay. Duct smoke detector maintenance, I think we talked about that a little bit, but the maintenance condition is when your duct smoke detector has drifted outside of its UL recognized sensitivity limits. So when a detector is in a maintenance condition, the LEDs on the sensor will blink every 5 seconds, and the power board LEDs will blink, the sensor LEDs will blink every 5 seconds. The power board LEDs will blink in an amber color every 5 seconds. So when you see this condition, it means that the sensor has moved outside of its operation window and that the detector, one, either needs to be cleaned, that will usually put your detector back into the range that it should be in, or if that does not work, then the sensor head would then need to be replaced in order to restore normal function to the detector.
Okay. All right, very good. Next question deals with dry nitrogen, and they're asking if they can clean a duct smoke detector with dry nitrogen.
Yes, you can. Yeah, cleaning a detector with dry nitrogen should work perfectly fine. Most of the time I hear people using either like a little vacuum or canned air, but dry nitrogen is perfectly fine to use also.
Okay. I know this is a question that we get with some frequency. They're wondering, this question deals with the sampling tubes, and if they'd want to drill or maybe feel they have a requirement to drill additional holes in the sampling tubes, does that violate the UL listing on the product?
Okay. No, actually it does not. What you always want to ensure is that your sampling tube, one, goes at least 2/3 of the way across the ductwork if it doesn't go all the way through the other side. And you want to make sure that just the holes have an even distribution across the width of the duct. And as long as you have that, you're not violating any sort of listing.
Okay, Good. Next question, just take them in the order received here. How can we do a shutdown with an addressable duct detector?
Okay. That question actually gets asked a lot because with the newer duct smoke detector models, it is different than how we used to do it. So if you are using a DNR intelligent duct smoke detector housing, on the power side there is space located on that section for an intelligent module to be installed in the housing. The module actually does have to be purchased separately, but there's space for it in the housing. And then once you have that installed, you can use that for shutdown.
Okay. All right. Next question. After smoke testing, is there a way to clear out the smoke in order for the detector to restart quicker?
Okay. Yes, actually there is. We made an update to our product, I want to say it was probably about a year ago, where we added a new smoke clearing feature. So this is allowing the auxiliary contacts to close upon detector reset, and that will turn on the fans to help with blowing any of the remaining smoke from the test out of the sensing chamber after that test is completed, so that the detector can then go into a full reset.
Okay, good. We've got about 6 minutes left here, so we're just going to keep answering questions that you posted. So if you do have a question, go ahead and use that question tab, and we'll either answer it via text, or with Lisa here. And we will be bringing down the "How can we help you" slide in about a minute. So if you do have anything that we can help you with, go ahead and enter that. And we want to show you Lisa's contact information should you want to get hold of her later. So Lisa, which detectors need a coil and a power supply for remote testing?
Okay. You could potentially need that in two situations. Our 2-wire duct smoke detectors need a coil all the time for remote testing. Also, our intelligent duct smoke detectors can be used with either a standard open area intelligent smoke detector head or what we call a remote test capable head. So we sell two different heads. They can both be used in the duct smoke detector housing. But if you're just using the standard open area style head, you would need to use a coil in order to do remote testing. But we also sell that remote test capable head. So typically when people are installing intelligent duct smoke detectors, we recommend them always using the remote test capable head, just to ensure that they have the head that they need in place whenever remote testing or signaling may be required.
Okay, very good. I'm going to go ahead and take this poll question down. We do appreciate you asking or answering how we can help you. And Lisa, why don't we, there you go, there's your contact information. So if you do need to get a hold of Lisa, it's posted there, and I'll continue to answer questions in the time remaining. Lisa, next question. Typically, duct detectors are mounted directly to ducts. When the insulation is applied, then the insulation is applied afterwards. Can the duct detector be mounted on top of insulation, and if so, does it require any special mounting?
Okay. The answer to that is it may or may not. Duct smoke detectors can be installed on top of insulation. The main importance there is to ensure that the exhaust tube that is shipped with the product, so in the parts bag there's a small exhaust tube, that exhaust tube is long enough in order to protrude into the ductwork. If it is not long enough, we do sell a longer version of our exhaust tube that can be purchased separately when it is needed. So if you have an application where that's happening, the part number for that extended exhaust tube is ETX. And you will find, if you need to find out more information about it, you can just use the search function on our website and type in ETX, and that additional length exhaust tube will show up for you.
Okay, very good. And I know we're answering a lot of questions online, so be sure to check there if your question's been answered there. Next question, can I install a duct smoke detector on the bottom of ductwork, on the bottom of ductwork.
Okay. You can. There are no sort of code restrictions that would prevent you from installing a duct smoke detector on the bottom of the duct. But I would really say you would only want to do something like that as an absolute last resort. When you install a duct smoke detector, as you know, there could be condensation or any sort of water that may be inside the duct. Then that water, if it got into that sampling or exhaust tube, would just run straight into your detector. So that would just be something to do as an absolute last resort. But if you can install it in any other orientation, I would do that prior to installing it on the bottom.
Okay, very good. Next question. Can the option of using two sensors tied back to one power board be done with your intelligent duct detectors?
Again, that's a question that we get asked a lot too, and unfortunately the answer to that question is no. That feature is only available on our 4-wire conventional models, but if you did want to do it, you could. Obviously, you can't use the actual intelligent product, but you could tie monitor modules to the conventional product and still achieve the same goal.
Okay. Next question deals with sampling tubes, and they're wanting some clarification. They're under the impression that they should span the entire length of the duct width. So they're asking to please clarify if the sampling tube is required to span that entire width.
Okay. No, it is not required to span the entire width. You want to ensure that the sampling tube covers at a minimum of 2/3 of the width of the duct. So if it is doing that, you'll still be getting a large enough sample of the air that's moving through the ductwork if it's just 2/3 of the way. But obviously, having it extend all the way across the detector is, is good practice as well.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and we apologize if we didn't get to your question in either real time online or verbally here, and we will follow up with you if we didn't answer it directly. Lisa, last question, was there a reason for angling the sampling tube downward 2 to 3 inches?
Okay, yes, there is a reason for doing that. The reason for having it angled down is, again, when I talked about mounting the duct detector on the bottom, angling the sampling tubes away from the detector just helps to ensure that there isn't an opportunity for water to accumulate in the housing.
Okay, very good. Well, Lisa, I just want to thank you for presenting today, and for those that attended today on behalf of System Sensor, I do want to thank you for joining us. As a follow-up, we will send you a brief survey in about an hour and would appreciate your help in filling that out, and we do plan to reward one of you that completes the survey with a $50 Amazon gift card. Thank you again for joining us. This does conclude our webinar. Please have a nice rest of the day.